can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Mary Liz Holberg,
Here.
Peter Bell,
Here.
Pat Bourne,
Here.
Jay Cole,
Here.
Pahua Hoffman,
Here.
Jim Hudland,
Here.
Elizabeth Kaus,
Here.
Doug Loon, Mary Jo McGuire,
Here.
Connie Subjam,
Here.
George Schember,
Here.
Aline Sharma,
Here.
Tom Weaver,
Here.
Janet Williams, Jerry Zhao.
Here.
Okay, it seems as though we have everybody but Doug and Mayor Williams, so hopefully they will join us soon. The next item on the agenda would be the approval of the minutes from the November 23rd meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So, motion by Mayor Kautz, a second by Mayor Hovland. Take the roll on approval of the minutes, please.
Holberg,
Yes.
Bell, Bourne,
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Hovland,
Yes.
Kaut,
Yes.
Loon, McGuire,
Aye.
Subjam,
Aye.
Schember,
Yes.
Turama,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Williams,
Bridget, we see her, but I don't know if she has her mic muted.
I see her as well, but I don't even see an option for a mic or headset. So we'll have to see.
I actually
Jerry
see her
Zhao.
twice on my screen. Mayor Williams, are you there?
This has happened to Janet before. She gets on two screens and then she's not with you at all.
Well, that's quite a feat, I guess.
Yeah.
Jerry Zhao,
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we'll move forward. And then, so the next item, just relative to the meeting minutes for today's meeting. Once the draft is prepared, we will forward those to the committee members by email and ask for your approval that way, as we don't intend to meet again. But so we'll just have a online, if you will, independent approval of the final meeting minutes. And then as we prepare the report, we're going to go over some of the edits, a handful of things, but I am looking to the committee for support or not, for granting me the ability to make technical type changes if we forget a report or if there's typos or that kind of stuff, rather than trying to get everybody back together. If I have your support and being able to do that as we put this final report together before submitting it to the governor. So is that
Madam
Chair, in agreement with that?
Madam Chair,
Okay.
do you want a motion to that effect?
It's up to the committee. I don't need it, but if the committee wants to make one, I think we're good just with an agreement. Then the next item is we sent out draft bios to everybody. Has everybody, can we assume that those are approved as distributed if we haven't heard from you, or is there anybody that wanted to modify what was sent out? Commissioner McGuire.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I would just modify mine a little bit, and I'm sorry if I missed that email. I would just send it in, though. I'm good. I'm just going to say I'm going to say less of one thing and more of another, just on mine.
Okay, so can we do this? If you have any edits to your particular bio, that they be submitted by noon tomorrow?
Yeah.
Will that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, so now we got kind of the housekeeping type things taken care of. And so you are all sent a draft report that will work from the one that was sent out earlier today. And so most of our time we're going to spend on the findings and recommendations. But are there any, we'll go through them, each of the three categories like we did before. But are there any general comments about any problems that were noticed outside of that portion of the report? Any comments of the letter to the governor, the introduction, background? We're all good? Okay, so then let's go to the actual findings and recommendations. I think they're page 10 to 19 through the report. And I do know that we have some issues with the third bullet, but starting with the first bullet, the role of elected versus appointed, thanks to Mayor Hovland for some of his structural ideas and input, so it looks a little different than what we saw 2 weeks ago, but for the most part, the content is the same. Are there any concerns, questions with the role of elected versus appointed? That first section. Commissioner McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I thought I sent something in, and it might have just been rejected, and I just was curious. It goes to the second bullet point on council members should not be sitting local elected officials. And I don't mean to be super sensitive about this, but it says in that second bullet, local elected officials often have jobs. I always think of our elected official status as a job, but maybe not everyone thinks that. So I would say have other jobs and obligations in addition to their elected office. It just says local elected officials often have jobs. I always think that being an elected official is like a job. I mean, I just think it might sound better if we said local elected officials often have other jobs and obligations.
Does anybody oppose that edit? Thumbs up.
Thanks, and I'm sorry if I didn't get that in time.
No, that's minor. Not a big deal.
Okay.
All right. Any other edits, comments on the first section?
I just wanted to Janet. I just thought that really applies more to the mayors than the county commissioners. I think that's why that's put in there.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I can see that. But yeah.
All right. Any other comments or inputs on the first section? Going once, going twice.
One just little, Mary Jo's got me thinking about the use of the word jobs. I wonder if we should say other employment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like that better, Jim, even.
Yeah. Okay.
So it would read other local elected officials often have other employment and obligations.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that. Good, Jim.
All right.
Like
so I'm going to go third time for the second time. Everybody good? Section 1. Woohoo, we're done. Okay, section 2. The role as a Metropolitan Planning Organization. Again, thank you to Mayor Hovland for the structural bulleting and ideas relative to that. Are there any changes to any of the text or recommendations, edits in section 2. All right, thumbs up by everybody. We're good with section 2. Oh,
Oh,
I had a question. Yeah,
oh, me too then, yeah.
there was a comment that came in from Doug, and it's now in the, about the congressional delegation. It's now in the committee minority counterpoint. It's like the last sentence. To bring this issue to a resolution, it has been suggested that the state's congressional delegation work to put this issue to rest with clear and straightforward statutory language at the federal level to clarify any real and perceived ambiguity. So Mike, is that just where it is now? It looks to me, I mean, if you're serious about that, should it be in the recommended action, or is it just there to, it's kind of buried. If you're serious about it or not, that's fine. Was that the intention, that it's just kind of mentioned in the minority section?
well, so I guess we could talk about that if it is the desire of the committee as a whole to move that into a recommendation as opposed to a component of the minority report. We could certainly do that. Mayor Hovland.
I prefer leaving it where it is because I think it is a distinct minority opinion. I think what we made it clear that we are a legitimate legal MPO.
Yeah.
There's no question about it in the minds of the majority of the people on this blue ribbon panel. Yeah. I think it's that language, if we include it, is where it needs to be in the minority counterpoint.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so maybe let's just establish that this is a minority counterpoint. Let's see how we can do this. So if you believe that the language should stay in the minority counterpoint section, can you give me a thumbs up so I can count thumbs here? Okay, Connie, I think it's a minority report.
I know it was.
I'm with you though. It's not a minority of one. I think it's a minority of 3 or 4. Not that it's gonna make you feel any better, but
That's okay.
all right.
It's just a point that, you look at, even, the letters we get back from federal government, they say that the Met Council can restructure and they would encourage us to restructure. But then the understanding is that, so it's always there. So in my mind, can you put it to rest one way or another? And maybe if you start digging into it, it gets worse and more contentious. So
the Citizens League did a deep dive on this, Connie, and I think were you a part of that? I mean, yeah, okay. Pahua, we did a deep dive on this whole thing and reported to the governor as well. And leave it alone because, boy, if it goes back to the feds, it'll be a mess.
So go ahead, Connie.
I have another potential minority proposal.
All right.
And that has to do, I think we did a great job of proposing the nominating committee to have more elected official presence to nominate candidates to the governor. And having been on TAP, there is right now, I think, this was in the past, I think right now it's about the same ratio of 18 elected officials and 16 appointed. I would say indirectly, the 16 would be appointed somehow through the governor, agency, and citizens. So it's 18 to 16. There is for the spirit of, if that is the goal to have, as a compromise, to have more elected officials involved with the process, both at the nominating level and at the tab level, which does the majority of the work as far as the work looking at the federal dollars and how projects get determined, to have but there are times that actually in a certain meeting, there are less elected officials in a meeting and more, and they're making a decision, and that has happened. So is that a possibility to change that ratio to have more, I don't know, whether it's 3/5 or have less citizen, less non-elected, more elected, or something like that? Or something like that to be considered. I'm not saying we should figure it out or do it here, but to be looked at the structure of the tab. If we're going to make the tab as important, and we're even talking about changing the title to transportation board, not just an advisory board. So that potentially could go a long way with the counties who have an issue with less elected official involvement in this process. So there you go. That's my second minority proposal.
So what I hear is Connie proposing an addition to section 2 that would make a recommendation that there be a stronger majority of electeds on the tab as a complement. And so I guess we should have some discussion around that. Mayor Couts, were you?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Mayor Hovland, you chaired the tab, and I think there is a majority of elected officials on the tab.
Mayor Couts, that is true, but it's like 18-16. I think what Connie was getting at was that you would have a stronger
more of a super majority
of elected versus appointed.
Yeah, 3/5 or something like that.
I mean, I think the point being is that the entirety of the Met Council is appointed, and so that the tab should have a stronger elected component to balance out.
I don't. Kim, you're muted, so you need to unmute so we could hear you. Mayor Hovland.
Yeah, thank you. I thought I was unmuted. Anyway, if you look at the prior page, that Amendment 473.146 Division 4B requires a majority elected officials. Connie is raising, I think, is whether there ought to be part of the minority opinion express the idea that maybe this could be something we discuss as including as a recommendation too, that there be a greater percentage of elected officials on the tab as opposed to citizens. When you look at that MnSTAT section 473.146, you'll see there's a clear statutory delineation on who needs to be there at a minimum. And some of them are agency heads. When you get down to it, there aren't that many citizen participants. They're there by district. I know that the tab functions well the way it is, with a majority of the people there being elected officials. Commissioner McGuire, the Chair Oberg, others that serve now on the tab, or haven't comment on that. But I think it is an idea worth kind of vetting through to either have it as part of our majority recommendation or a minority counterpoint.
Yeah, I agree, Jim. I was just thinking how I feel. I'm glad you brought it up, Connie. I've been sitting on tab for years now, and it seems to work well, but I'm not opposed to having it be a minority report or even looking at it if we want to have, I'm an elected official, so of course I don't mind, but I think I'm just not sure, yeah, what that would do. Jim's right about there aren't that many citizen reps anyway, but I can see your point too, where we want to have maybe a little more of a predominance of electeds. That would, because the Met Council we're making a recommendation to not elect any of them. So I can see it has some merit to me. I don't know where to go with it though.
I think we're going to have to develop some consensus, because I'm hearing that it should either be part of a recommendation or part of the minority report. So I don't know if we want to go around the room or do thumbs up, thumbs down, or how you want to resolve this. But again, kind of the difficulties of Zoom versus in person here. Anybody else want to weigh in, or?
My bias would be, this is Peter Bell, is that it would be a part of the minority report. I think that sends the signal to the governor that we consider that it has some level of support on the committee, and that he may want to give it some consideration as well. But that's the level that I sense from the rest of the committee, is that it's an important enough subject to bring to his attention. And then, but I'm not sure that it has robust, broad-based committee support. So that would be my inclination.
All right, thank you. Tom Weaver.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It was, well, I'll just echo Peter's comments, so I really don't need to say anything else. I think the minority report is the appropriate place to put the language.
All right, so in general terms, would the committee be comfortable with Connie and I working out language to include in the minority report that would reflect a stronger elected versus appointed on the tab complement? Aileen?
I just have a question. Do you have a sense of what breakdown of electeds would it be between county versus city? Like what would the balance be? Do you have because I think that kind of matters. I think that some of the elected balance is really carefully calibrated now between city and county government.
Yes, Madam Chair, Aline, I haven't thought about it at all, and I think there could be some logic to certain solutions, and I didn't dive into it because I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, honestly. But I think if it's going to make the minority report, if it potentially is going to get looked at, I assume it's going to be done legislatively as part of other things maybe, and we could look at it. I certainly would look at what current members of TAB, it's been a while since I've been there, but to see what would work best and what's the easiest path.
Well, you could also look at a situation where you might make the agency appointees non-voting, so you wouldn't necessarily change the complement on the electeds, but reduce the complement of voting on the appointed end of things. So you wouldn't necessarily have to change that complement.
My concern, Madam Chair, is that frankly, I think that the tab is working well. And so I hesitate to make substantive changes that might reflect themselves in unanticipated effects that we haven't thought through, particularly when I think the tab is working well. I am sensitive, however, to the public perception that there isn't enough elected official input into the council. And so I'm willing to tinker around the edges to deal with that perceptual problem. But I don't really want to change the substantive workings of the tab or frankly, the Met Council, because I think that it is, all things being considered, works fairly well. That's my personal opinion.
Commissioner McGuire.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I agree with Peter. I'm willing to look at it because of the composition of the Met Council not being elected. But I like Eileen's question that, you know, how would we make it look? And it is pretty finely crafted that we have some balance between commission, you know, counties, cities, and all of that. So I guess if there was a minority report done, I would encourage for it to be very general, you know, and not make any specific recommendations on numbers or anything, but that it would just be looked at, because I would actually obviously want to weigh in if I saw anything more specific.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, I would probably have to, I mean, not all people think that the tab is working well, okay? Not all counties believe that the tab is working well. So, I mean, I think that there has to be some recognition of that. And that if anything, you know, if this report results in any kind of reforms that, you know, can address some of that. I mean, so definitely the issue would be part of the minority section is what I'm hearing. Now the question is that can Connie and I work on it? Do you want me to send it around to everybody? Just like, you know, we'll go milk toast on it. So not to offend anybody, but I think there is a recognition of that lack of elected input that all but one other MPO in the country has that we don't, and trying to mitigate that a bit. So thumbs up that Connie and I can work on one or two sentences to the minority report to address that issue. All right. So any other comments or input on the second section?
Madam Chair, it seems to me that it could be as simple as a one sentence saying it was also suggested as a minority viewpoint that the governor consider establishing a greater percentage of elected officials on the tab.
Yeah, we're not going to spend a lot of time with it, but I don't really want to write it on the fly right now either. I think we'll respect the majority of the committee and put it, you know, in the minority in kind of a watered down form.
All right.
So any other comments on the second task? And Doug, I don't know if you were on when we discussed the issue of the congressional delegation, and were you on when it was determined that that should stay a part of the minority report?
No, I was not, and I apologize. I was lacking a link to get on today. I don't know if that was on my end or somewhere in the cyber world. So, yeah, I think the comment that we were suggesting is this issue needs to be, I think, long-term resolved. So I don't know where you put that, but it's some acknowledgement that some clarity from Congress on this to help resolve it. Otherwise, this open-ended gray area will reemerge in the future, was my thinking on it. So if that's something you want to consider.
So before you got on, we did have discussion around this, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong or unfair, but I think the consensus was that the committee did not want it added to a recommendation, that it should stay in the minority report, and the general consensus was that this could cause more problems to bring it forward for federal action. And so the committee did not support making it a recommendation.
Okay, I guess I don't understand the logic of that. I think it would be in the interest of everybody to have clarity and a full acknowledgement by Congress onto if they're going to continue to grant the grandfather, as opposed to an interpretation of it. So I'm happy to go offline on it. If that's a decision of the group, that's fine with me. I just don't grasp the logic of that.
Well, in fairness to you, somebody that I agree with you, Doug. So I'm going to ask somebody on the committee. I think Aileen had raised her hand. Maybe she might want to comment to summarize the majority opinion on this.
Oh, I don't know if I can summarize the majority opinion, but I can summarize my own opinion, which is just that I don't really think that I feel like we've had so many opportunities to have, again, the executive branch agency that's responsible for interpreting the will of Congress on it has weighed in several times. And I think it's not really, doesn't appear to be gray. I think the House had the opportunity, had a proposal to pass something, the Senate opted not to. And so that's, I mean, if we are interpreting actions specifically of Congress, I think it doesn't, I think because people feel like they want to continue to bring it forward as something that is unclear and ambiguous, then it kind of creates this cloud of ambiguity. But I feel like we've learned through many hours of testimony that it's really not an ambiguous question. It's quite clear that we have the statutory authority to do it. And we've been told many times by the relevant executive branch agency that we do, that we are in compliance.
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent expression of the majority opinion.
So, Doug, any?
If you want to put a line in there on the minority side, that's fine. I think the acknowledgement, though, from some part of this group that until Congress actually spells it out clearly, you're dealing with an interpretation from an agency that has political appointments that will always be changing.
So were you able to review the language that was added to the minority report, and are you comfortable with that?
I will take a look at it and let you know.
Okay, it's on page 17. So, Mayor Couch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pahua, when we did the deep dive, it was clear the actions of Congress. Am I correct in remembering that?
That was, and there has since been additional confirmation after our study in 2015. So I believe I'm looking at I think 2017 was the latest confirmation.
Just one additional point there. I mean, we've had, Doug, I hear your point about, administrations change. We've had about 30 years to clarify the point since this was enacted. So it's been a while.
Madam Chair, I see the line that is fine with us.
All righty. Thank you. All right. So I think this is the third time going on the third time for the second section. Any other comments before we move on to the final section of the recommendations? All right, let's move on to the effectiveness of delivery of the regional transit service. And that we do have a highlighted comment at the very end, highlighted in lovely neon green, submitted by Peter Bell. I don't know, Peter, if you'd like to share your rationale for this, and if the language that was presented in the draft reflects what you're proposing.
Yes, Madam Chair, it does largely. I will remind my fellow committee members, I raised this concern based upon my concern that if we as a committee didn't address the potential budgetary situation that the state of Minnesota faces, we would be seen as not having fulfilled our responsibility. Now, subsequent to that, of course, we've had a budget, a projection that was pleasant for this upcoming year, but rather dire for next year. And one of the things that I thought might make sense, and I didn't have a chance, I sent this to Judd to really discuss this specific idea, but that we might want to consider over some period of time, I suggested 5 years, a report on the efficiency of various subcomponents of our transit system, and that report be a part of, not necessarily the centerpiece of, but a part of any decision making on either scaling back the transit system or expanding it. And I guess the argument that I would make is that if the efficiency of the transit system isn't a significant part of the decision making, what should be? And I think there are many other considerations that I would include in that, but I think that has to be a part of it. And my suggestion was a way in which that could take place.
All right, thank you. Thoughts? Other committee members? Commissioner McGuire.
Madam Chair, I appreciate it, Peter, bringing this forward. I don't have any trouble with studies. I don't. I think TAB does a lot of studying already. I know it at the TAB. You know, we help them, guide them on their studies and everything. So we know they're doing studies, and I don't have necessarily a problem with this. I don't know. Do we make them take it out of their budget, or how do we pay for it? So it just would be an added expense for them, just to acknowledge that. So I was just curious if you had any ideas. Are you assuming you're thinking that they would just take it out of their budget as they would almost everything else? But that would be my only concern.
Peter, when you address that, I read it that it would be an independent evaluation. It wouldn't be done by that council.
Yeah, I originally had thought that the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota would be a logical place to do that. And I still think it would be a logical place to do it. I think it would be an independent study, but I think it would get a fair amount of attention from the press, and people would weigh in one way or another on the validity of it. But it would provide some guidance to the Transportation Advisory Board and the Met Council on the expenditure of dollars. And I think the productivity of the subcomponents of our transit system would be a good place to start. And there will be debate. I want to be very clear on what constitutes efficiency. And I restate that I don't think it should be the sole determining factor of where we scale back or where we expand. But boy, I think it should be a part of that discussion.
Mayor Coates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Peter, appreciate your comments. One of the things, and I agree, if we're going to do a study, then it'll be a comprehensive study that really understands and defines what is cost effectiveness, so that we all have a shared meaning around that. Because cost effectiveness might not be what we need to deliver services because I go back and I know what happened in the 80s and why we have suburban transit services. And so the thing is it viable to just have a monopoly of one service when it can't meet it, when it has a different system compared to what the suburban transit services provide in terms of the system that it has? So I would look for a really comprehensive, where there is engagement from the public, and there is good civic engagement and a clear understanding of what it is that we're talking about and how services should be delivered. Because I do not want to revisit what happened in the 80s and why we have suburban transit services in our region. And, you know, that's not uncommon around the country. So I'm not opposed to doing a study, but I'd like a comprehensive study where everybody can have a voice.
Okay, so Connie next, and then Pahua and Aline. Connie.
Yes, a quick question. Peter, so I think you answered my first one about the truly independent, and I don't know why I thought of the legislative auditor because they already did one, but the University of Minnesota sounds like a good option. So what I'm trying to figure out what specifically would, I guess when time comes and we look at what the study, what the scope of it is, it would be all over the place, but is the intention to look at the, maybe that's the last sentence there where it says decision-making process and operational plan, is that you're talking about the governance and how things are structured? You have Metro Transit, you have Suburban, you have Metro Mobility, you have different services about how things are governed, or more, or maybe in addition to efficiency of comparing efficiencies between agencies and how you'd want to change that possibly.
No, I'm not talking about the governance of the subcomponents of our transit system. I'm really only talking about the cost. And I think that it would also serve the purposes of transparency. I think the public doesn't have a clear sense of how some subcomponents of transit cost one thing and other subcomponents of transit cost something else. And I think that would be in the service of public transparency to be aware of that. And I agree with Mayor Couts that all parties should be involved with that. If the University of Minnesota were to do such a study, for it to have any credibility, there would have to be, everyone would have to have a seat at the table, in essence, to determine how even efficiency is determined. But I think it could be done, and I think it would be important to do.
Okay, Pahua, then Aileen, and then Jerry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to offer Peter and the group a friendly amendment to the language. Every independent study every 5 years seems like a lot of time and effort, and I wonder if you would be open to starting of a study now with 5-year updates, so that it seems to me like I'm thinking about the 10-year planning cycle, and I'm wondering whether a study now with every 5 years an update would make more sense.
Madam Chair,
Peter Bell.
Pahua, I would accept that as a friendly amendment and think that makes a great deal of sense.
Well, and I think the value to it, we found when we were trying to get data sets, even for this exercise, different systems keep different data in different ways. And so to begin to try and kind of frame up what different providers should keep as far as for measurement tools, if you will, even that, to start talking the same language across systems would be a plus in my mind. So
I agree.
Yeah.
So, Aileen?
Yeah, I was just going to offer, I agree. I like the amendment that Pahua just made. I think it makes a ton of sense, and I'm supportive of this addition.
All right, Jerry?
I'm mute. Yeah, I like the idea to recommend this periodical research, external one, to look at efficiency, but not only efficiency. I'm glad that the wording is efficiency and geographic equity. And I with Peter the idea that it's for the awareness. But I would also like to suggest a friendly amendment along with Connie's suggestion. I think it would be good to add the governance into the final sentence. Maybe something reads like this: this study could inform the decision-making process for transit governance, as well as investment and operational plans. I see the governance issue as one of the key charge that we are looking at, and certainly that would affect the actual investment and operation.
Peter, your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I have more questions about that because I think when you get into governance issues, you do get into a closely related but not identical issue, and I would rather kind of keep it set as close to dollars and cents as we can and have a separate issue being looking at the governance of it. I just would kind of like to, my original idea, I wouldn't necessarily oppose that, but I'm less enthusiastic about it because I think the more we keep it to dollars and cents, the easier. It's going to be difficult to do, but it would be easier if we did this than if we got into governance issues, which are inherently more political and more subjective than hopefully the dollars and cents analysis would be.
All right. Who's up next? Pat.
Just a word of caution for everybody, and it's hard to argue against doing periodically some kind of analysis of the system and efficiency, however that might be measured. But I suspect if we asked the Met Council staff, and particularly the staff of the folks who staff the tab, they might well come up with something that they do periodically that sounds a great deal like this. I don't know what we do with that. I don't want to argue against Pahua, Peter, Aileen's suggestion here that periodically studies like this done, but that incorporate, and I don't want to mess around with the words here, but I think we're going to find that something very much like this is already being done. It's just not getting the level of attention that any of us might expect that such a thing would get. And the audience for it may now just be TAB and TAB's committees, if even that. It's just a word of caution.
And I think that that's a fair point, but I think the need to get outside of Met Council and Metro Transit studying their own stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's just, there's an inherent conflict.
Yeah.
So to take it out, and if in fact they're doing something similar, then the cost of preparing the data sets
would be
low. Far less.
Yeah.
Exactly. But to have that independent voice, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I agree with you, Madam Chair, because if it's done within the Met Council, then there's a huge conflict of interest. And I think that's why some of us would say maybe move like Suburban Transit Authority under MnDOT, like MnDOT also takes care of Greater Minnesota Transit. But doing a study with an independent agency or station like the university, I think gives it independence and all voices will be heard.
Right. Okay, Tom, and then Connie, and then Mary Jo.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I support the study language. I think it's a good idea, and I also do think it's important that it be independent. I struggle with Jerry's suggestion on including governance. I think my hope was that this committee was going to put the governance issue to rest, at least for a while. I think by saying it needs to be studied, every 5 years or every so often down the road just keeps that issue alive. And I'd rather see that kind of put to bed to the extent that we're able.
All right. So I think Connie is next.
Yeah, my question was, since the legislative auditor, they came out with a strong report, do you think, Peter, that this would maybe address some of their issues? And I'm trying to figure out when would they want to come back and do their own? I don't remember how and why they did it last time, to come up to do an audit to the legislature. What the dynamic of that is, as a legislature as a whole, I know it's different people, but are they seeing themselves as part of this too, or watching this maybe? Or
Well, I saw the legislative audit report as dealing with the governance issue, not the cost issue, primarily. And this deals with the cost issue, as a distinct subcomponent. And so I see them as somewhat different. I do agree with Tom. I would kind of like to put the structure on the back burner and move the cost up and give it more visibility. But in part, it's for the credibility, I think, of our committee, and to give the governor a bit of guidance if transit comes under a closer scrutiny. At least one way that we said that you should look at or consider how you would allocate ever increasing scarce resources.
Okay, I think Mary Jo's next, if I'm correct.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would just like some clarification on, as it's worded, efficiency and geographic equity. There's other kinds of equity that we might look at. Are you specifically just wanting geographic equity? And I know we've talked about we don't want just efficiency, and I agree with that. But there's other kinds of equity that we could look at in a study. I'm not opposed to a study, but I'm just putting it out there that maybe you could clarify what you were intending, and if there's a way we could, if we're going to have a study, let's study other kinds of equity too.
Madam Chair, I kind of mentioned geographic equity because and the reason why I didn't include other types of equity, I considered that, but I kind of wanted, because of reasons of cost, to keep the scope of it a little bit narrower. If we expanded it to other types of equity, we would, have a much larger and a much more, in my view, expensive study. And I just thought we'd say, what's the cost of the subcomponents and where does our transit system go? Because as other regions in the 7-county area want transit, I think it is a fair question to ask, well, what's the benefit of that? What do they have now? And what's the cost of providing that? And that's kind of what I thought we would do. So I wanted to keep geographic equity as the component so that we could kind of keep it within a box. The final point I would make is we talked about other types of equity, particularly racial equity, elsewhere in the report, which made me feel more comfortable with keeping it to just geographic.
I appreciate that, and that helps me. It's just hard for me to just focus only on transit when we know that housing and jobs, there's just so much that's intertwined here. So I didn't want to be totally limiting, but I'll just take other people's comments.
I think we're trying to get at the opt-out regions versus the Metro Transit service areas. We keep hearing this is more efficient, that's more efficient, and to date, I don't think anybody has a good handle on, what the efficiencies are or not, given the different providers and the different strata of types of transit too. So Mayor Hovland.
I'm just looking for a clarification from Peter on the use of the term geographic equity. We don't use that term at the tab. It was discussed, but we use the term geographic balance. So if you're distinguishing between geographic balance and geographic equity, I'd like to understand what you mean by geographic equity.
Madam Chair, Mayor Hovland, I would be comfortable with the term you just used. There is no distinction in my mind between the two.
What has evolved at the tab is the very conversation we've had here is people get hung up on the use of the word equity and what it means, and to eliminate that possibility of confusion around the use of the word, quote, equity, use the word geographic balance.
I would be very comfortable with that. And I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay, that edit looks like has approval. Any other comments about adding Peter Bell's language as amended? Have we massaged it enough? Everybody's comfortable with it? I've got lots of thumbs up.
Yep.
Okay, so anything else that anybody wants to discuss prior to wrapping this up? Mayor Hovland.
I think we need to go back to the prior page, one right before Peter's recommended addition. I'm concerned that there's some disparate language treatment or some ambiguity here that we need to clear up. So if you look on just above the findings, where we started with the italicized bold print, the second paragraph above that says the committee found that the region's transit governance structure is complex, but that services are generally efficient and cost effective when compared to similar services provided in peer regions.
Okay, can you give us a page number? I have no clue where you are.
I don't have a page on this.
They're in the lower left-hand corner.
Page 17.
Not on my draft. Not on my draft.
17.
Okay, thank you.
It's got it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's actually the second full paragraph of number 3, issue number 3.
Yep. Okay.
Well, keep in mind we've just said the structure is complex, but it works pretty well. Then we go down to the first finding. It says the committee generally agrees that if the region's transit system are designed today, the current structure would not be recommended as it leads to inefficiencies and conflicting priorities for investment. Well, we just got done saying up above it works pretty well under the circumstances. What's the message we're trying to send here? And I also, right above it, we talked about COVID and the effect that different things can have on transportation. And then we lead with this inconsistency in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here. And the reason I changed it around in my draft was because I thought the first thing that was most important is that we deal with fiscal issues. We all know that transit is underfunded, and that gets buried on the next page as a recommendation. I had that as number 1, a sustainable form of funding for all transit operations is essential to the future of the region and the state, and then the explanation for it. Now we come with this simple sentence that doesn't make sense in relationship to the paragraph, two paragraphs above it. So what are we going to do to fix that?
One thing that would address that, I think, Jim, would be to delete that first bullet point if we agree that with the language that's in the paragraph above it.
That's a solution. And we do not want to look like we're inconsistent in the report we're giving. I mean, the system is what it is. Why do we even bother to opine on what we wish we were? when Mayor Couts has clearly stated the reason we are what we are is because of problems back in the 80s and the suburbs weren't getting the right kind of service. So why long for something that we aren't, or try to pick on something for no good reason? So I'd say get rid of that first bullet point.
Is anybody opposed to Mayor Helvin's idea to get rid of that bullet point?
No, put that on Pat. Pat, the Bourne idea. The Bourne identification.
He's trying to make you happy, Mayor.
Only if everybody likes it, is it my idea?
Everybody good with that? How about you, Mayor? Does that solve your issue?
It does. I think it does help.
Okay. Mayor Couts? You need to take yourself off mute, Mayor Couts. There you go.
Thank you. Is the first bullet point that we're all looking at is this: the committee generally agrees that the regional transit system were designed today, the current structure would not be recommended. Is that the bullet point you want removed, Mayor Hovland?
Correct.
Yeah, I agree. That is so confusing. Yes.
Well, and I don't think anybody, that's like, it's not a revelation. I think everybody would agree to that. that you wouldn't do it this way if you were starting from scratch.
That can be said about so many things in life.
Especially government. Government's messy.
It is.
So, anything else? Connie.
Promise this my last one. It's just a confirmation from Chair Bell. Is the portion in green? I think you said that your intention was for it to be an independent, because the version that I have, maybe you said that it wasn't going to be run by the council, that it would be an independent study. I know we talked about university. The version I have doesn't say that, so that would be changed, or that it's an independent study, because I don't see the word independent anymore.
Well, I think I think it helps to add the word independent. I mean, the word contract, I think independent helps.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pahua?
I offered a friendly amendment, Madam Chair. Here's what I currently have, and I could share this offline too. The council should contract with an independent entity for an efficiency and geographic balance study. This is to reflect Mayor Hovland's amendment, with updates every 5 years to evaluate, and then the rest is the same.
All right. Is there any value to just saying that the executive branch? Do you want to take it completely out of the council?
I would leave the word just independent in, though I don't feel strongly about that, but I think independent would be adequate.
But do we want the council setting the contract for the study of their own operation? How independent is that?
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a skeptic.
I agree with you, Chair Holberg.
That hurts a little bit, you guys.
Mary Liz, you've got to remember that I worked with you very closely when I was chair. So
is that what you call it?
Judd, don't take it personally. We just want it to be fair and equitable on all fronts.
I am perfectly fine with all this.
I think, can we just take council out and just say there should be an independent
That's
review?
fine.
And then however the executive branch decides to do it and not name who does the contracting?
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Connie, anything else?
No, but just a side note, when I look at Judd, this weekend there was a program about George Clooney. It was on CBS Morning, and amazingly, Judd looks like and sounds like George Clooney a lot. I wonder if you're twins.
But does he cut his own hair? That's the key thing.
You saw it too.
Don't go
I
there,
want to
Connie.
know if he cuts his own hair.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I did my own COVID cut.
Do you use the same tool George Clooney uses?
That's right.
Yeah, it's just pretty much. It's all falling out anyway after this. So
That's what I thought. All right. Anything else? I'm thinking maybe we should resend out Peter's paragraph just to make sure we have it right. I'm a little nervous with the amount of edits. So remember, your bios are going to be included as distributed unless we hear from you by noon tomorrow. So we're going to piece by piece try and put this thing. And then we'll resend this paragraph with the edits just for a second round of comments. And then Judd, with the help of the stellar staff, will look for any kind of typos or missing handouts, or as we go back through the minutes and all the presenters. A lot of information was distributed to the committee, and I know that you read every single word of it that was distributed to you. So that's over 300 pages. That's quite a lot. So
316.
there you go. So any other final for the Jud's?
Madam Chair, we just need to cover the ground about how people want to sign this document and if they're okay with an electronic signature or just. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so Judd has offered to bring copies of the report around to all of your homes and or businesses. We figured it might take him a couple days, but each of you could see him face to face in order to provide a real live signature to the report. Absent that, we could try and collect electronic signatures, or we could just list the participants and I would sign my name.
Yeah. Or
I probably live the closest to Judd of any of you.
yeah, the other is, Judd, do you guys use DocuSign?
I have no idea. We probably do. But I honestly, I don't know.
I mean, if it's not a big deal, we're quite frankly just hoping one signature and then the list of all committee members will suffice in these days of COVID.
I'm okay with, Madam Chair, your suggestion.
Yep.
Okay. As
And
much
Madam
as you
Chair.
wanted to see Judd and give him some Christmas cookies when he shows up at your house, we won't send him on that adventure.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And what I was going to say is, all of these videos are being archived at the meetings as well. So there is an actual documentation of people, supporting this final document as well.
Mayor Hovland?
Madam Chair, just looking at the executive summary, which is appended to the end of the report we just discussed, I think when you and Judd work on this, based on the conversation we just had about that inconsistency as to effectiveness, ineffectiveness of the existing system, the first sentence under the last bullet point needs to be addressed so that we need to do something with that sentence based upon the fact that we removed that one bullet point from the prior page or the 2 pages before. And I'll leave that to the judgment of you and Judd's staff as to how that should be recrafted. But it needs some attention.
Give us a page number again, Mayor, or you don't have page numbers. I'm still lost.
Yeah, it's just the executive summary, Madam Chair, which is the very end, and it's one page.
So it lines up with what we did in the report.
That's correct.
Exactly. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Good catch. Mayor Couts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just clarification. So I'm okay if you sign it on behalf of all of us.
Well, yeah, I'm just going to sign my name. I'm going to have fun trying to sign all of your names.
On behalf of all of us because we're all listed.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
We can just send electronic signature, right? Or no, we don't. Yeah.
We can do that as
well. I think there are some people that don't like their signature running through electronically, from what I understand.
Yeah. I'm okay electronically or DocuSign.
All right. Anything else? Well, it's kind of weird that we never met in person, but I think you need to tell the governor that when all this is over, he needs to have all of us to the mansion for dinner.
Great idea.
Because we never got to eat together. As a thank you, he should have us over for a barbecue in the summer or something. I don't know. And then we'd actually get to meet each other in person.
Oh, you'd be happy to do that.
Hey, when we were doing the whole piece about the Livable Communities Act, Governor Arnie Carlson had us over for brunch. So yeah, Waltz can have us over for dinner.
I'm guessing we'd even do a potluck or something if it was, too much. So.
Get a couple of months down the road, we go for dinner and vaccination.
There you go. There you go. That could be interesting.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, you did a great job. I was great to serve with all of you. It was a good committee. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to everybody.
Yes, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for the job you did too. You did a great job in both keeping us on track on the one hand, but allowing everyone to have their say on the other hand. Yeah. And that's a great balancing act. And you did a great job with that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for your leadership.
Check up for the books for 2020. What?
Thanks to Judd and the team at the Met Council for all their work.
Yeah,
yes.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right,
It was definitely fun to see everybody and connect with all my old friends too. So this was fun.
Yeah.
All right. We'll send Peter's paragraph around for a final look-see. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, just happy holidays to everybody and Merry Christmas.
All righty.
Be safe, be healthy.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.